Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Dai Gaura Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasupraya Shudabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, texts 15 through 17. Or is it 14 through 17? I forget. Okay. Okay, it's 14 through 17. So there's a few verses with no purports or very small purports. So I'll read through the Sanskrit and the English on my own, and the purports on my own. And then when we get to text 17, we can read the Sanskrit together. Manuruvacha Hareshaham Bhagavato Varte Yami Vita Sudana Stanam Tva Ihanajanihi Prajanam Mama Cha Prabho. Sri Manu said, O powerful Lord, O killer of all sins, I shall abide by your order. Now please let me know my place and that of the living entities born of me. Yad akoha sarva bhutanam mahi magna maham basi asya udarane yatno deva devya vidiyatam. O Master of the demigods, please attempt to lift the earth, which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all the living entities. It can be done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord. Purport. The great water mentioned in this connection is the Garbhodak ocean, which fills half of the universe. Matreya uvacha parameshti tvapan manye tatam sanam avakshyagam katam enam samuneshya iti dayodayachiram. Sri Maitreya said, thus, seeing the earth merged in the water, Brahma gave his attention for a long time to how it could be lifted. Purport. According to Jiva Goswami, the topics delineated here are of different millenniums. The present topics are of the Svetva Varaha millennium, and topics concerning the Chakshu millennium will be discussed in this chapter. Okay, so now we're on text 17. Sajato me shatir vabir Pralayamana rasam gata Atartra kim anusteyam Asam sarga yojitai Yasyaham hridayat asam Saisho vivadatu dame Srinjato me kshisarvabhir Pralavyamanam rasam gata Tahartra kimanu steyam Asamam sarga yojitai Yasyaham hridayarasam Saisho vivadatu me Srijato me siktirvabhir Pralavya manana rasam gata Tatra kim anusteyam Asambi sarga yojitai Yasyaham hridayarasam Saisho vivadatu me Vaishnavis. Srijata, while engaged in creation, may of me. Sititi, the earth. Varbihi, by the water. Pralayavamanaha, being inundated. Rasam, depth of water. Gata, gone down. Ataha, therefore. Atra, in this matter. Kim, what? Anusteyam, is right to be attempted. Asmabihi, by us. Sarga, creation. Yojatai, engaged in. Yasya, the one from whose. Aham, I. Hirayat, from the heart. Asam, born. Sa, he. Ishaha, the Lord. Vidatume, may direct unto me. Brahma thought, while I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. Purport. The devotees of the Lord, who are all confidential servitors, are sometimes perplexed in the discharge of their respective duties, but they are never discouraged. They have full faith in the Lord, and He paves the way for the smooth progress of the devotee's duty. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakoya Chakshurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swam Padantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Vancha Kalpatarumbisya Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Durgame Patiminantasya Sakalat Paragatir Mahur Swakripa Yastidanena Santa Sanpavalambanam. When I read this purport, I was thinking of something that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say, that the life of a devotee is not a path of roses, but is a path of thorns. So I was meditating on that this morning, and how in the course of practicing devotional service, we should not expect an easygoing life. Actually, there's a purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam where Srila Prabhupada says, an easygoing life and Krishna consciousness go ill together. So in the course of practicing devotional service, we should not expect comfort, we should not expect pleasantries, we should not expect entitlement, but rather we should expect personal inconvenience, scarcity of resources, and unforeseen obstacles. And these things are personally arranged by the Lord in order to help us make swift advancement in the practice of devotional service. So what we see that's going on here is Lord Brahma is placed in a position of personal inconvenience and unforeseen obstacles. He's just engaged in his service, and in the process of engaging in his service, something has gone terribly wrong. The entire earth has been placed into the ocean, and it's been completely lost. And so now he's contemplating what can be done. as far as he's concerned, he's done all he's been able to do in order to execute his service properly in the matter of creation. So now we see that the earth is being placed in the ocean, and he has no choice but to take shelter of the Lord. So in the course of our own life, we can see that many circumstances come in the path of our execution of devotional service, which are personal inconveniences, unforeseen obstacles, or scarcity of resources. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to teach us a mood of devotion which helps us continue to take shelter of the Lord. And this is actually what Krishna consciousness is all about, to be cultivating a mood of dependence on Krishna. This is explained in the definition of Saranagati, which has been given by the Acharyas. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjitam rakshiti titi vishvaso goprit vevaranam tata atmanik shepa karpanye sadvida saranagati. And this particular verse describes that there's 6 symptoms of surrender. So often, some people, when they think of surrender, they think of, jumping off a cliff and just leaving everything to chance. But actually, surrender is a scientific process. It's not just something that functions on the platform of sentimentality, that, now I'm surrendered. But actually, surrender is a scientific process, and it requires cultivation, just like anything in Krishna consciousness. Krishna Anushilanam. We have to cultivate a mood of surrender constantly in our daily life. And Krishna makes arrangements in our life to help cultivate that surrender through personal inconveniences, unforeseen obstacles, and scarcity of resources. These things will come in the course of our devotional service, and being placed in circumstances that are unpredictable, that's where real service actually can begin to take place. So what is the most important lem of these 6 symptoms of surrender? This is explained by Jiva Goswami in his Bhakti Sandarbha, where he explains that the most important principle of surrender is this Goprit Vevaranam Tata, which means that I accept that I am Krishna's servant. This means this becomes the overwhelming identity or abhiman of the devotee. We carry many conceptions of who we are in this world, and many of these conceptions are different masks that we put on in order to protect us from the onslaught of the material energy. But actually, the whole point of the material energy is to help remove those masks. That's why people go through different fads and phases of life, and different senses of identity, different senses of belonging, because ultimately the material energy is arranged to rip away these different conceptions of life that we have. So the most important principle to be developing in our own practice of devotional service is this principle of Goprit Vevaranam Tata. We need to learn to be cultivating a mood that I'm a servant in all circumstances. And we see that what's qualifying Lord Brahma, the verse that comes right after this, is my Guru Maharaj's one of his favorite pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Varaha pops out of Lord Brahma's nose. So Krishna can make himself present to us in various ways, but what I was particularly thinking about in this verse is the mood that Lord Brahma has right before he receives the darshan of the Lord. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also used to say that we shouldn't try to see God, but we should try to serve God in such a way that he wants to see us. So Lord Brahma, although there's many reasons to be discouraged, because he situated himself in a mood of service, he's able to overcome this unforeseen obstacle. And we see this throughout the life of our acharyas. In the life of Haridas Thakur, he was put in so many unforeseen obstacles. He was simply chanting the names of Krishna, but due to being born in a Muslim family and into a Muslim community, he was very much disrespected by the local people in that particular region, particularly the head of that region, the local zamindar. The local zamindar, he wanted to punish Haridas Thakur. He wanted to kill Haridas Thakur. But despite the fact that Haridas Thakur was brought in front of the zamindar, and despite the fact that he was asked to stop chanting Krishna's names, he said that you can cut my body into millions of bits, but in each one of those bits, you'll hear the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. I won't give up this chanting in any circumstance of my life. So in order to test his determination, and actually not just to test his determination, but to kill him, the Zamindar ordered him to be beaten in 26 different marketplaces. 22 marketplaces. So he's beaten in 22 different marketplaces. And at the end of it, after being beaten in 22 separate marketplaces, Haridas Thakur wasn't the one that was experiencing distress. It was the people around him who were experiencing distress. The people in the community were saying, stop, stop. How can you be doing this to him? He's bleeding, he's about to leave his body. How can you continue to punish him like this? And then the people who are beating him, they're starting to feel fearful, because they know that if we don't kill you, then we're going to be killed. So Haridas Thakur, not being concerned about his own personal inconvenience, was concerned about the inconvenience of others. And actually in the Chaitanya Bhagavata I was just reading yesterday, that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, despite the fact that he was being beaten, Haridas Thakur didn't feel anything. So in the Mahaprakash Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he turns around and he shows his back to Haridas Thakur. And he has all these lashings on his back. And Haridas Thakur is saying, my Lord, where is this coming from? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, you remember when you were beaten in those 22 marketplaces and you didn't feel a thing? It's because I was there. I personally accepted that inconvenience. And despite the fact the person who did this to you is meant to be punished, I didn't punish him because you would feel distress if he was put into distress. So this is the mood of a devotee. So Haridas Thakur, he could see that the people who were lashing him and practically killing him were in distress. So he accepted a mystic trance. He was thrown into the river, and then he just got up about 10 kilometers down the river and just walked away. And the Zamindar, he walked straight back to the Zamindar. The Zamindar was completely amazed. And in the same way, Haridas Thakur is tested when he was living in Bainapur. He was living inside of a cave, chanting 3 lakh names every day. And while he was chanting there, the local Zamindar of that particular area, somehow Haridas Thakur has bad relationships with the Zamindars. But the Zamindar of that area, he decided he wanted to allure Haridas Thakur with a prostitute. So he sent a prostitute. And Haridas Thakur knew that the Zamindar was doing this, and he knew he could have gotten up and left. But out of his compassion for this particular prostitute, he stayed in that place and continued to chant. So he was tested 3 nights in a row, and at the end, the prostitute actually ended up accepting initiation from Haridas Thakur. That place still exists in Bangladesh. You can still go there and see the place, and the prostitute's still chanting there. A murti of the prostitute, but the point is that's being made through these various pastimes is that in the course of our service there will be tests, there will be inconveniences. But our concern is not so much with the tests or the inconveniences that come. Our concern is with maintaining the proper service attitude. We're not interested in resources, we're not interested in facility, we're interested in maintaining our service to the Lord. So we see in the life of Madhavendra Puri, when he was ordered by Shakshi Gopal? No, which it was Gopal. This is a Gopal deity. So the Gopal deity in Govardhan, he was ordered that, my body is still extremely hot from being in the ground for so long. Can you please acquire some sandalwood? At that particular time, it was extremely dangerous to travel through India. But he did it anyways for the service of the Lord. So despite personal inconveniences, despite unforeseen obstacles, and despite lack of resources, Madhavendra Puri still continued to execute his service. And the only way one is actually able to tolerate the inconveniences that come in the course of one's service is if one is fixed in this disposition of Goprit Vevaranantata. That if one feels that they're a servant of Krishna, mantra sparsasta kaunteya, Siko san sukadukata. Agama panino nityas tamstiksvasta bharata. That actually the inconveniences that come in the course of executing our service, executing our various duties, these can only be tolerated if one is receiving a higher taste from being fully absorbed in the feeling of Chaitanya Dasamuni, Chaitanya Das, Chaitanya Dasamuni, Tarandas Ranudas. Advaita Acharya is saying with great joy And I'm simply a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm a servant of the servant of the servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then from that, one can, being fixed in this feeling that I'm a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from that consciousness, one begins to accept things which are favorable to devotional service. Utsaha nischaya daryat tat tat karma pravartana. That one remains enthusiastic despite the fact that there's reasons to be unenthusiastic. That one remains determined despite the fact there's many inconveniences that are being placed in the course of one's determination. Prabhupada, in relationship to determination, would often give the example of a woman who's recently been married and she wants a child. That she wants a child, she has a husband, but Prabhupada would explain that just in the course of that relationship, a child will naturally come. So one has to be patient and determined in order for the fruit to come. So in the same way, in the process of devotional service, we have to be patient for the ultimate result. It's not that the ultimate result will come immediately. But it's not so much what we're doing in devotional service that's of concern for Krishna. But what's more important is the mood in which it's being done. So this is the lesson that we're getting from Lord Brahma. That he's done so much in the course of executing his services. But still there was an unforeseen obstacle that came in the course of executing his service. And so we see that the attitude that he's cultivated here is, how can I continue to do my service? And then the byproduct of that is that Lord Varaha is about to reciprocate in the form of coming out of his nostril and then lifting up the earth and filling in the gap with what Lord Brahma was unable to do. So this is mentioned in the verse previous, that it is done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord. So in all circumstances of our devotional life, we have our own endeavor and we have the mercy of the Lord. And according to the challenges that we have to face in the course of executing our various services, we can consider those challenges as the greatest pleasure. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains. That whatever inconveniences that come in the course of executing my service to you, I will consider that to be my greatest pleasure. And so if we're willing to accept those inconveniences and tolerate the circumstances that come in the course of executing our service, then the result of that is tatteno nukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatmam vidam vipakam hridvag vakubir vidadam namaste jiveyu mukti padesadayabak. That although the devotee has to undergo so many tribulations for the satisfaction of the Lord, the devotee has great hope in the mercy of the Lord because of being properly situated. Just like a wife with a husband is properly situated so she can expect a child to come. So in the same way, if we're properly situated in our service, the more inconveniences we accept, the more we can be dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and the more we can be dependent that Krishna will make himself available to us in our time of need. So this is why it's important that when we have a time of calm, for instance, in the morning program we have a time of calm, that we are fully invested into everything that we're doing. We're fully invested into kirtan. We're fully invested into chanting the holy names. We're fully invested into hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, worshiping the deity. Because in this time of calm, just like soldiers prepare for a war, this is the time for us to prepare for the inconveniences that will come in the course of our service. And then when the time of storm comes, it's a time for taking shelter. So everything in the material world is functioning for the purpose of us becoming Krishna conscious, actually. And one who is becoming Krishna conscious, they don't see anything that's separate from their endeavor of becoming Krishna conscious. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevan upashati sarva bhutesu chatmanham tato na vijigupsate. That one who is developing this consciousness of being constantly dependent on Krishna and seeing Krishna in all circumstances of life, they have nothing to hate in this world because they understand that everything is coming from the Lord for my own spiritual advancement. And so one feels completely dependent and one feels completely grateful for the mercy of the Lord. And the mood that arises is this mood that Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about in Saranagati, where he says, Tumi tu tomara, ami tu tomara. Ke kaja, apara dane. That, my Lord, you are mine and I am yours, and there's no greater treasure than this. So despite the fact that circumstances may change, people may change, services may change, if one is attached to the service of the Lord and one's only feeling in life is that I belong to Krishna and Krishna belongs to me, then one will never feel alone. As Prabhupada explains, the mood of a sannyasi in the Bhagavad Gita is that the sannyasi is willing to go anywhere and he feels that I'll never be alone. Krishna will always be with me. So as a devotee is developing this sense of dependence on Krishna, then whatever personal inconvenience, whatever lack of resources, and whatever unforeseen obstacles come, the devotee is properly situated and can expect the mercy of the Lord in due course of time. And we can see that in the next verse, because Lord Brahma is situated in the right attitude, that despite the fact there's every reason to be discouraged, he's just thinking, how can I depend on the Lord and how can I continue to execute my service? And Krishna reciprocates in the form of Lord Varaha by giving him darshan. So this is a wonderful lesson for us in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we can see how everything in the Srimad Bhagavatam is simply directing us towards pure devotion. That we're not supposed to take shelter of any type of, chatu vargya, that we can just completely depend on Krishna and completely depend on making our only goal in life, nitya prema gati. Krishna prema can be our only goal. And that by doing that, we can expect that Krishna will be present to protect us. What's that verse? 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm skipping my mind. Yeah, Konteya Pratijanihi. There's another verse that there's no lack or no lack or diminution. That I will preserve what you have and protect what you have. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana yar manupasate. Tesham nitya biyuktatmam yoga kshema vinamyaham. That Krishna will provide what we have and preserve what we have if we can simply maintain a mood of servitorship. But if we lose that mood of servitorship and depend on our own ability to fix a circumstance, then we lose that shelter. So it's the duty of a devotee in all circumstance to be constantly cultivating a feeling of dependence and a feeling of surrender towards Krishna. And that's a few things I thought about in relationship to this verse. So we can have a brief discussion. It's 8:26, so we have a few minutes. So any questions or any reflections? Yes. What's the 3, 13, 17.
Thank you, Devavrata Prabhu. It's a reflection that I have, but also a question. When you were mentioning that we go through so many ups and downs or challenges, and also you brought up the example of this is like a training, like when soldiers have been trained up. So I was reflecting that one of the biggest challenges we have is actually how to work together.
Yeah.
Relationships sometimes become so difficult among any part, in any society, anywhere. And even within the spirituality, we go through these big challenges, and that's why we are not progressing sometimes. So our objectives, of course, we know it's to please Krishna, love Krishna, and here we are in the battle. So we're battling mostly sense gratification, because when you don't get what you want, when your sense gratification is not satisfied, then you start doing so many things. So maybe if you can expand a little bit more in that, and the relationships, and how to actually apply these matras parsas to Konteya and so many verses. And
well, one thing I've been meditating on recently, I was in Hyderabad before I came back to America. And one thing that I noted about the brahmacharis there is that they have 4 days of the week where they're engaged in preaching, and 3 days of the week that are just dedicated for sadhana. So they spend 2 hours together. They have 3 groups of brahmacharis that are together for 2 hours reading various books. So the senior brahmacharis are reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the junior brahmacharis are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and then those who are new to the ashram, they're reading Bhagavad Gita amongst each other. They read for 2 hours a day. And then they have an hour-and-a-half brahmachari class where the brahmacharis, they don't just speak about brahmacharya, but they talk about the principles of pure devotion. So in those classes, they have 6 hours of brahmachari classes in the week, and then 5.5 hours of brahmachari classes, and then 6 hours of reading together, plus whatever they're doing on their own personal time. And so I was asking a devotee about this because I was noting the sadhana program as I was, staying in the ashram. So I was asking one of the devotees there, I said, so, tell me about what you guys do here. He said, Radhesham Prabhu told us that we should be accountable to each other. So they've developed this program of sadhana where they're accountable to each other, that they have a bare minimum program of sadhana which they do together to keep each other strong. So I think it's important to always keep one particular verse from the Bhagavatam in the forefront of our mind in the course of living in a community of devotees. Parasparanukattanam Bhagavan Pavanam Yashaha Mitaratir Mitastushtir Nivrittir Mita Atmanaha. This verse talks about the devotees should come together and discuss Krishna-katha and each other's association. And the result of that is mitaratir, one develops affection for Krishna and affection for the devotees. Mitastushtir, one's mind becomes satisfied. In nivrittir mita atmana, one naturally becomes detached from material sense gratification. So I think it's important that despite the fact that we may have so many services that we're executing, we should always have a place that we call home. And what we should be calling home is not just a comfortable circumstance materially, but what we should call home is a circumstance which is spiritually enlivening in the association of devotees. And it doesn't need to be a big group. Actually, the Srimad Bhagavatam class is just the bare minimum. But we should have other programs throughout different communities and different ashramas where devotees come together and discuss Krishna-katha. Because that's where advancement actually takes place. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabanoi Shravanadi Shutachite Karana Udoy. That unless one is taking in this Shravanadi jal regularly, then one's devotional service can become very, very dry. And despite the fact we may be chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 regulative principles, doing service, if we're not experiencing taste for Krishna-katha and the association of devotees and developing deep realizations in that association, then our Krishna consciousness can become very dry and the missionary spirit can be lost. And losing the missionary spirit is problematic because that means that we're losing the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If one feels a missionary spirit within their heart and one feels a desire to want to extend themselves and sacrifice their life for the purpose of the Sankirtan mission, that's indicative of Lord Chaitanya's mercy within one's life. So we need to create environments, and it doesn't need to be an official thing. It's actually better if it's unofficial, where devotees come together, they hear and chant, and they develop a sense of belonging amongst each other. If that sense of belonging is there, then despite the fact there may be challenges in service, they can come back together and relish the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam, relish the message of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and consolidate and assimilate the experience that they're having in services in relationship to the knowledge which they're acquiring from the Shastra. And then these two things come together which produce deep realization within the heart of the devotee. And that deep realization results in Siddhanta Bolya Chitte Nakara Lash, Iha Hoite Krishna Lage, Sudrit Manash. Sudrit Manash means the mind becomes fixed in Krishna. So we constantly have to be observing within our own life, where am I going to speak about Krishna with the devotees? Not just that I'm hearing and hearing and hearing, and I'm not sharing my realizations or hearing others' realizations. I know in my own life, despite the fact I travel constantly, I have like 2 or 3 devotees who I'm constantly speaking about via WhatsApp. We leave each other voice messages, and we're just discussing Krishna-katha. We are discussing different ideas and concepts and things that we're reading in Shastra. And most of the things that when I'm traveling and preaching, most of the things that I'm speaking about is just coming from those exchanges that I'm having with various God brothers and devotees. So we have to have that environment for ourselves. Otherwise, the missionary spirit can be lost or our Krishna consciousness can become very dry. So that's a few thoughts. Obviously, there's many things that can be said in relationship to this, but just on a point of what's going to give us the most results in terms of achieving the ultimate goal of life, Krishna Prema. I feel this is the ultimate solution for practically any problem that we see within societies and communities, is how much do devotees come together and speak about Krishna, chant the holy names, and cultivate the 6 loving exchanges amongst each other.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's excellent. Just to add a little part that what you were just concentrating and speaking about your experience in the Brahmachari ashram, and we know that we have 90% more of our devotees are grihastas, and many of them live outside. They also have interactions with the temple, and they also chant their rounds and everything. So that will be same applicable.
I would say that grihastas have more of a responsibility to come with each other, because brahmacharis, they're duty bound to come with each other. If brahmacharis don't come together with each other, then they become isolated, and their life in the brahmachari ashram will become very, very short-lived. But if you're situated in the grihasta ashram, the position that you have to be in by default is cooperation amongst your family. And so amongst other grihastas, there has to be cooperation through making Krishna-katha the center. So grihastas have more of a responsibility because they're 90% of the society. And we see that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, practically all of his preaching was done amongst grihastas. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati kind of established a renounced order of life in order to expand preaching on a worldwide scale within India. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur's whole program of the Namahata was specifically meant for grihastas. It was specifically meant for grihastas to come together, do kirtan, engage in Krishna-katha, and develop relationships amongst each other. Grihe tako, vane tako, sarahare bole dako. That it doesn't matter what ashram one is situated in, that's secondary. If one needs a particular circumstance to facilitate a psychophysiological position, that's fine. But within that particular psychological disposition, it's not just grihe tako, vani tako. There has to be sada, hari, bole dako. There has to be the chanting of Krishna's names. There has to be Krishna-katha going on within those respective positions. Also for sannyasis, sannyasis are probably in the most dangerous position. And luckily, in the Sankirtan movement now, in ISKCON, we have facility for sannyasis to come together. And I see the most strong sannyasis in our movement have deep relationships amongst each other. Shivaram Maharaj, Naranjana Maharaj, Devamrita Maharaj, they come together frequently when they're in Mayapur, and they just read for hours and hours and hours. So this is a principle that's applicable to whatever ashram that you're situated in. And particularly within the ashram one's in, there should be environments for those ashrams to come together, do kirtan, do Krishna-katha, and benefit from each other's association. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for the nice class. So you were mentioning that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told us that we should work in such a way that Krishna will come to see us. So can you give some example in our movement?
Where Krishna, an example where
Krishna will come and see you.
Yeah. So I think one example is this example that I gave of Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri, he was serving, and he was asked by Gopal to go to, I think Orissa, or near Orissa to acquire sandalwood. And it was extremely dangerous for him to get there, and even more dangerous for him to go back because he was carrying a commodity. So to cross state borders at that time was extremely dangerous because there was Muslim magistrates that were overseeing the borders, and not only that, there was thieves and dacoits along the way. So it was an extremely dangerous journey. But we see that he was able to apply that sandalwood to Shirochora Gopinath. And Gopal reciprocated with him by saying, you can apply that sandalwood to Shirochora Gopinath and it will be the same as applying it to me. So he didn't have to make that journey back. So we see the Lord reciprocated with Madhavendra Puri. But generally that reciprocation comes at a point where one is in a forlorn conclusion. Once one comes to a forlorn conclusion of life in relationship to Krishna and being completely surrendered, then Krishna reveals himself to the devotee. There's many examples throughout the Shastra But this one in particular is one that I can think about.
Yeah, actually you remind me the story of Jua Maharaj also.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the beginning he was trying, to see Krishna himself, but
Yeah.
finally, under the guidance of his spiritual master, Narada Muni, he worked so hard, and Krishna come and see him.
Another
again.
one is Haridas Thakur.
Oh, yeah.
Haridas Thakur was always extremely humble. One of my favorite pastimes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the Beta Kirtan pastimes. There's so much about Vaishnav culture and just the way Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would deal with his devotees. It's so enlivening. So there's a point in that particular section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Haridas Thakur is standing outside Kasi Mishra's house and he's paying obeisances on the side of the street. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first, he goes, "Hey, where's Haridas Thakur?" And the devotees say, "Oh, he's out on the road paying full dandavats." So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Haridas Thakur, come in." And Haridas Thakur is just staying there and he's refusing to enter. He says, I'm not qualified. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't say a thing. And the Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood his mood. And so then later on, we see that Haridas Thakur was initially very sad and morose that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going to Jagannath Puri. But he went to Jagannath Puri, and when he was in Jagannath Puri, although he couldn't enter the Jagannath temple, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him a garden where he could chant all day, and instead of him having to go see Jagannath in the temple, Jagannath would come see Haridas Thakur in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu every single day and bring him prasadam. So Haridas Thakur had such a humble disposition that one, he was able to continue chanting constantly, and simultaneously Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come and give him his personal darshan on a daily basis.
Thank you. That's a really, wonderful example. Thanks. Yes.
Just quickly, thank you, Prabhu, for the class. It won't take long, but could you tell me the reference, or if you're willing to explain the 6 symptoms of surrender? We mentioned the topmost being identifying yourself.
Yeah, so there's first one in the course of the verse, Anukulasya Sankalpa. So first one is accepting everything favorable for Krishna's service, rejecting everything unfavorable, considering Krishna to be our protector, which is what we see actually in Lord Brahma. He's considering Krishna to be his protector. Fourth is to consider Krishna my maintainer. Fifth is to consider oneself extremely meek and humble. And then 6 is to see everything in relationship to Krishna. Everything is the mercy of Krishna. These are the 6 symptoms of Saranagati. If you want to learn about this in depth, there's a book called Saranagati written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he writes about 5 or 6 songs for each limb of surrender. It's very instructive.
Thank you,
Krishna. I think we have to wrap up, but we can speak after. Thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vanchakalpatrum Vistya Krivasindhi Vichapatitanam Pavani Vaishnavi.